I spent 10 years dreaming of the moment I would see my daughter again. 10 years believing she was safe. 10 years saving money overseas so I could come home and give her a better life. But when I finally returned, I walked up to the house I once owned, and the door opened before I could knock. My daughter was standing there, and she was wearing a maid's uniform. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were terrified. And instead of saying Dad, she quietly said, "Good afternoon, sir. My name is Richard Hale. I am 55 years old. After 10 years working abroad, I returned to Austin, Texas, expecting to come home to my family. Instead, I arrived to find my daughter living like a servant inside her own childhood home. The house looked the same from the outside. Same stone walls, same porch, same oak tree. But the moment I walked closer, something felt wrong. There were shoes all over the porch, none of which belonged to my daughter. Men's boots, women's heels, children's sneakers. A house full of strangers. When my daughter opened the door, she looked like someone who had forgotten what freedom felt like. Her shoulders were pulled in. Her voice was weak. She kept her eyes low, too scared to meet mine. I said her name. Emily. She froze as if the sound of her own name hurt her. She whispered, "You shouldn't be here." I frowned and told her this was our house. She shook her head quickly. "Please, Dad, go. They'll get angry." Before I could ask who she meant, a man stepped into the doorway behind her. He was wearing my old jacket. He looked me up and down with annoyance, like I was disturbing his peace. He asked, "Who are you?" I said the truth. "This is my house, and she is my daughter." He laughed like it was a joke. He said, "Your daughter works for us." Emily winced. I felt my heart drop. I said she didn't work for him. He shrugged and replied that she was the housekeeper, the cook, the cleaner, and she lived there because her job required it. I stepped forward and told him he was mistaken because I was the owner of that house. He smirked and said I was wrong. He claimed the house was sold 10 years ago by Emily's legal guardian. That guardian was my ex-wife. Emily whispered to me, "Dad, please stop. If you argue, they will punish me." I froze. "Punish you? How?" She looked down, ashamed. She said they take away her phone, they lock her in the basement, they limit her food, and they make her work through the night. My hands began to shake. My daughter had been living like this for years while I worked overseas believing she was safe. The man grabbed her arm and told her to get inside and return to work. She winced, but before I could push him away, Emily grabbed my hand. Her voice was small and terrified. She said, "Not here, Dad. Please. If you fight him, they will hurt me." I looked into her eyes and saw everything she had been through. Pain, fear, and a small, fragile hope that I had finally come back for her. I stepped back, only because she asked me to. The man smirked again like he had won, but he hadn't. Because in that moment, I made myself a promise. I was going to free my daughter. I was going to expose every person who hurt her. I was going to take back everything they stole. They thought I was gone forever. They thought she had no one left. They thought she was theirs to control. But they were wrong. I had returned. And I was not leaving without my daughter. I walked away from the house only because Emily begged me to. Every step felt like walking away from a burning building while someone I loved was still inside. I reached the sidewalk and looked back one last time. She stood behind the man, half hidden, eyes full of fear. When the door closed, it felt like the world had shut her away again. I sat in my rental car for a full minute, gripping the steering wheel hard enough for my knuckles to turn white. Every part of me wanted to storm back inside, drag her out, and fight whoever stood in the way. But her voice kept replaying in my head. "Please, Dad. Not here." That fear wasn't fake. She knew something I didn't. Something worse. Something that made her stop me from helping her in that moment. I needed answers before I made my next move. I needed to know exactly what happened in the 10 years I was gone. I drove to the old neighborhood grocery store. It was one of the few places that still looked the same. A familiar cashier stood at the counter, Mrs. Jenkins. She had known Emily since she was a child. When she saw me, her eyes widened in shock. "Richard? Is that really you?" I nodded. She rushed around the counter to hug me. We all thought you moved on forever. Does Emily know you are back? I couldn't pretend. My face told her everything. Her smile faded. Did, did you see her? She asked softly. I nodded. She slowly shook her head and sighed. Poor girl. My heart tightened. What happened to her? Why is she living like that? Why is she working as a maid in her own house? She looked around nervously and lowered her voice. Richard, this town changed after your divorce. Your ex-wife left soon after you moved overseas. She sold the house to those people and abandoned Emily. I stared at her. She left Emily behind. She nodded sadly. Yes. Emily was only 14 when it happened. She had no guardian. But those people claimed your wife gave them temporary custody. No one questioned it. Emily had nowhere else to go. She was terrified. I swallowed hard. Why didn't anyone call me? She sighed. Your ex-wife blocked your number everywhere. She told everyone you did not want contact. Emily tried to find a way to reach you, but those people took her school laptop, her phone, everything. My chest ached. They kept her from contacting me. Mrs. Jenkins nodded again. They slowly isolated her. At first, she lived there as a tenant. Then they made her help with chores. Then it turned into work. Then it turned into what it is now. A sick feeling rose in my stomach, and no one stopped them. She shook her head. They threatened her. Told her the law was on their side. She was just a child. I leaned on the counter, trying to breathe. 10 years of missed calls, missed birthdays, missed warnings. Her mother had erased me from her life, and those strangers finished the job. I asked, who are those people? She lowered her voice even more. The Carters, husband, wife, 2 kids. They are mean, manipulative, selfish people. They pretend to be respectable, but everyone here knows they are bullies behind closed doors. They have been using Emily for years, forcing her to clean, cook, babysit, even run errands. They never let her leave the house unless one of them is watching. My hands curled into fists. Emily said they punish her. Mrs. Jenkins looked down. They do, and worse. She tried to leave once. They locked her in the basement for 2 days. No food, just water. She almost fainted when they let her out. I felt hot anger blast through my chest. Mrs. Jenkins whispered, they wanted control. Your daughter is too gentle to fight back. She learned to survive quietly, and she believed she had no one. I forced myself to stay calm. I asked, did she ever try to get legal help? She nodded. About 2 years ago. But the Carters destroyed the documents. They even forged your wife's old signature to show legal custody. The officials believed them. Emily was too scared to argue. After that, she stopped trying. The room felt like it was spinning. My poor daughter had lived through hell while I worked thousands of miles away, thinking she was fine. Mrs. Jenkins placed a hand on my arm. Richard, she needs you. She's been waiting for someone to take her away from that house. I whispered, I will. I stepped outside into the parking lot. My mind was racing. I needed proof. Real proof. Something that could tear down every lie they built. I took a deep breath and went to the only other place that could give me answers. The county records office. Inside, I requested property transfer documents for the house. The clerk typed a few things and printed a stack of papers. I sat at a small wooden table and flipped through them. My name was crossed off the deed 10 years ago. The buyer was listed as Martha Carter, signed by guardian of Emily Hale. But the signature was wrong. Very wrong. I recognized my ex-wife's handwriting. This wasn't hers. Not even close. Someone forged it. I checked the witness signatures. One name caught my eye. A neighbor I knew, Mr. Thompson, who moved away years ago. But the signature wasn't his either. A complete fake. There were phone numbers too. All dead. All disconnected. I whispered to myself. These people didn't buy the house. They stole it. I kept flipping pages. Something else was off. The sale price. Way too low. almost like a fake sale created just to transfer ownership on paper. My head was pounding. I gathered the documents and left. Next, I visited an old neighbor, Mr. Logan, who lived across the street. He looked surprised to see me. "Richard, I hoped one day you'd come back." He invited me inside. His wife brought tea. There was a long pause before he finally said it. "We wanted to help. We really did. But the Carters warned everyone. They told us she would be taken by the state if we interfered." "Taken by the state?" I asked. He nodded. "They claimed she was abandoned. And since they had the guardianship letter, no one doubted them." I asked, "Could she have run away?" He shook his head. "She tried. Twice. They tracked her down both times. Told her she would get in trouble. They scared her into submission." My jaw tightened. "How?" He looked at me with sorrow. "They told her you were dead." Everything stopped. My breath. My heartbeat. My thoughts. Everything froze. Dead. Emily believed for 10 years that I died. No wonder she looked at me like she was seeing a ghost. Mr. Logan continued. "When she saw you today, I think it shocked her so deeply she didn't know how to react." I stood up slowly. "I am taking her back." He nodded. "Just be careful. The Carters won't let go easily." I walked out with one thought burning in my mind. They stole my house. They stole my daughter. They stole 10 years of her life. But I was going to end it. Tonight. I drove straight back toward the house. My mind was no longer confused or scared. It was focused. Every detail I had learned. Every lie the Carters told. Every year they stole from Emily. It all hit me like a fire spreading through my chest. I was done holding back. When I parked down the street, I saw the house lights still on. Emily was probably still working inside, cleaning, cooking, serving the very people who ruined her life. I walked toward the house slowly, watching the windows. A shadow passed by the kitchen, then another near the living room. Voices echoed faintly. I recognized the man's rough tone. I stood at the front door and knocked. Hard. The kind of knock that says I am not here to wait. The door opened halfway. The same man appeared. He looked irritated and tired, as if I had interrupted his evening again. He crossed his arms and said, "You, again." I stepped forward into the doorway. He attempted to block me with his body, but I didn't stop. "Where is Emily?" I asked. He smirked. "Working, as she should be." I felt anger rise, but I kept my voice steady. "Call her. Now." He pointed a finger at me. "This is my home. You don't order anything here." I stared directly into his eyes and said, "It's my home. And more importantly, she is my daughter. Call her." He laughed sharply. "You lost this house 10 years ago. You lost her too. She belongs here now." Something inside me snapped. Not anger. Something colder. Determination. A line crossed. I stepped fully inside the doorway. He grabbed my arm to push me back. The moment he touched me, I pushed his hand away and said in a low voice, "Touch me again and I will press charges." For the first time, he hesitated. From behind him, I heard a soft, nervous voice. "Dad." Emily stood at the corner of the hallway. Her apron was stained. Her hair was messy. Her eyes looked exhausted. When she saw me, she froze like she wasn't allowed to move. The man barked, "Emily, get back to work." She stepped backward automatically, like a trained reaction. I raised my voice. "Emily, come here." She trembled. She looked at him, then at me, conflicted, terrified, lost. He snapped again, louder this time. I said, "Get back to work." Something inside her broke. She covered her ears and whispered, "Please stop shouting." I couldn't take it anymore. I walked around the man and reached my daughter. I put my hands gently on her shoulders. She flinched at first, then relaxed slightly. She looked up at me. Tears began to slip down her cheeks. "I'm here," I whispered, "and I'm not going anywhere." The man stepped forward aggressively. "She is not leaving this house." I turned slowly to face him. Yes, she is. He laughed again. Says who? I took the stack of documents from my bag. The forged deed. The fake guardianship papers. The illegal sale. I threw them onto the table beside him. Says the law, I said. Every paper here is fake. Every signature forged. And I have copies of all of it. His smile disappeared instantly. I continued. I know everything. I know you isolated her. Locked her up. Took her property. Lied to the community. Scared her into slavery. This ends tonight. His wife entered the room, confused. What is going on? I turned to her. Your husband forged legal documents. That is a felony. Keeping a minor as a servant is another crime. Abusing her is another. The police will take all of you away if I make one call. Emily's voice shook behind me. Dad, please. The man stepped closer, trying to regain control. You have no proof. I stared at him. I have everything I need, and I already sent digital copies to 3 people. You can't hide this anymore. His face drained of color. He glanced at Emily, then at his wife, then back at me. For the first time, he looked afraid. I reached for Emily's hand. Let's go, I said softly. She hesitated only for a second. Then she nodded. She took a shaky step toward me. Then another. Then she squeezed my hand like she had been waiting 10 years to feel safe again. The man shouted, If she leaves, she isn't coming back. I looked over my shoulder. That's the point. We walked out the door together. And for the first time in a decade, Emily stepped out of that house not as a servant, but as my daughter. Emily held my hand tightly as we walked down the sidewalk. Her steps were small and unsure, like she expected someone to drag her back at any moment. I didn't let go of her for even a second. When we reached the car, she hesitated. She looked at the seat like she wasn't allowed to sit in it. I opened the door for her. She whispered, Am I really allowed to leave? I said, You were always allowed. They just made you believe you weren't. She slowly sat down. Her shoulders trembled. She covered her face with her hands and broke down crying. 10 years of fear, control, pain, and silence came pouring out at once. I sat beside her and let her cry. She kept apologizing over and over. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry I didn't find you. I'm sorry I stayed. I shook my head. You survived. That's all that matters. For the first time, she leaned her head on my shoulder like she used to when she was a little girl. She whispered, Can we go home? I smiled sadly. Yes. From now on, you'll only live in homes where you're loved. As we drove away, the house disappeared behind us, and Emily finally began to breathe again.